Who said that you can't paint on an old piece of wood? Well, as long as it's got a smooth surface, sand it down, seal it up with a varathane or a varnish or something, just to keep the paint from soaking into the wood and, well, sometimes bleeding all over the place. There's no better way to put it. By putting a little bit of a sealer on the wood, you make it smooth and you keep the paint from soaking in, and you can control it a lot better. And that's what I did in this particular case. In fact, I even stained the wood because I really wanted to have that rich, rusty base to work up from. It's just me. You can color it any color you want. Now, in the first 35 years of my life, I worked in watercolor. And many of the techniques in watercolor are not the same as oil painting, but one of them is. It's called wet on wet. And it's basically when you want to do backgrounds with a little bit of foreground, or backgrounds with a lot of foreground, or whatever. You want to do a painting from start to finish, and you want to do it all in a single session. Those kinds of paintings have a special mood to them, as I hope to demonstrate to you here. I've got a big number 10 filbert brush. Those are the ones with the round tips on them. They're not sharp-edged, but you can make them sharp simply by pressing them down on your palette and get the tip as fine as you possibly can, so you can paint the tips of those trees like I'm doing right now. And basically what I did was I put my foundation line, or I guess the place where I want my eye and the viewer's eye to land when they first look at this painting. Now, I never went to art school, no secret about that, but I didn't really learn all those rules, such as the thirds and those things. I heard about them later on. But what I do know is that when I lower the horizon line slightly, as I've done in this case, somewhere below the halfway point, I'm going to force your eye right down into the center of that horizon line, and then up into the big, beautiful sky, which is, well, it's hopefully going to unfold here. Now, along the bottom, I took a little bit of Prussian blue and I tapped a little bit of Van Dyke brown into it, and some titanium white to give it a lighter tone. In that way, I get what I call that earthy color, and I just love earthy color. I just love it. I'm just not one who gravitates to the bright, luminous colors. That's for another artist, I suppose, but for me, I really love those earthy, deep tones. And living close to the Great Lakes, well, we have, a lot of cold temperatures, and our winters are brutal. But it keeps those Great Lakes really cold. And when you get cold water in large bodies like that, they tend to be quite dark looking. They don't have that kind of a turquoise that you get over by the ocean, those of you that are blessed to live in such beautiful places. But the Great Lakes, there's a certain richness in that darkness, because the water isn't so much blue or turquoise, but it's got that, what I call a steel blue kind of a look. Now, I'm using some of that color up in the sky as well, but you can see that I've taken a generous mixture of titanium white and started off the sky with a nice focal point. So what you're seeing happening here is that focal point is not only down at the lower section of the painting, or the lower third, but it's also not in the center left to right either. It's actually over to the right a little bit. And that makes a painting a little more interesting. it's too predictable, just far too predictable if you put the center, if you put the point of focus right in the middle of your canvas or board or paper that you're working on. You just kind of create a little bit more of a point of interest when you just move it over to the right or to the left a little bit. I like to say that makes the viewer wonder, what's over there? What's around that corner? You know, if I were to paddle my canoe over there, what would I see just through that passageway and around the corner? That's the kind of a mood we want to get going here. So we use that titanium white to really anchor that and to really drive that point that it's lit up down there in those passages and there's light over there. So maybe it's worth going to because over here is dark and stormy. I am not always a philosophical painter. Sometimes I paint paintings just for the fun of it. But more often than not, I will put a little bit of philosophy into what I'm doing. And in a case like this, that's exactly what's happening here. Because who in their life hasn't gone through trauma or difficulty or storms, tempests even? And who hasn't sought some kind of solace and peace? Well, in this painting, I want to tell that story. I want you to think about the fact that no matter what you're going through, there's always hope. If you just hold on a little bit longer. Sometimes when we get through stuff, we find out later, it was nothing anyway. I don't want to belittle the fact that sometimes some of the stuff we go through isn't little. It's quite significant. But as long as there's tomorrow, there's hope. And that's what the artist gets to do. You see, we're storytellers and we're conveyors of emotions and feelings. And it's okay to do that because we're human and we're presenting our art to humans. So why not? Why not be honest? Why not share a little bit of what we're going through? There's plenty of florals and there's plenty of beautiful sunsets. I've done my share. But once in a while, it's a good idea to let the drama come through because we can all identify with that. Now, along the bottom, I'm taking some Prussian blue and a little bit of Van Dyke brown and mixing it together and getting not a thorough mix, just a loose mix on my brush. So I've got some Van Dyke brown, I've got some Prussian blue, and when I put it on the surface, it comes out in different values, darker and lighter. Starting to establish the fact that I've got a foreground here. I'm going to put some of that dark tone up into the clouds as well, once again, driving that drama. It's where it gets really exciting. And now I'll use that same old brush and just start to blend the edges. I want my board surface to disappear completely. And I'm using the texture of the wood, which is really nice. Even though I've sealed it, the texture there's still a little bit of texture there. So as the brush strokes onto the board surface, it's got that rugged kind of a look and feel. You can even see the lines of the bristles of hair on the surface. It's great. When you're an oil painter, you love stuff like that. And I'm just smoothing out some of the edges, not all. I want it to be a little bit rough. And I don't want those dark areas to punch out really hard. I want them to be kind of graduated. So I'm going to smooth out around the edges of them. I'll stroke a little bit of light color through them just to keep them, again, from becoming too brooding. We don't want it to be depressing, after all. We want it to be kind of a soothing painting, if that could be possible, even in a storm. Sure it is, because when you see that there's hope off in the distance, well, that's comforting. So here we are, we're just smoothing out the edges. We're going to make it all sort of come into focus. It's like when you look through the lens of a camera that's blurry, and you turn that lens, You turn that focus ring and everything starts to get sharper. And that's exactly what's happening here. We're making it all come into focus so that the viewer won't see so much technique, but the viewer will actually get the vibe, get the feeling, and the emotion. That's really what it's all about. I think when it comes to some paintings, you should be able to stand in front of it and literally feel something. And in this particular case, it's a tempest. Kind of like my kitty cat if I don't feed her on time. If I'm a little slow to fill the bowl. Here's the painting all finished. I skipped ahead so that we could pass some of the not so interesting stuff. Thanks for dropping in. Be sure to like and subscribe to the Robert channel to the Robert Painter on YouTube.